Welcome to our 28th author interaction. I'm Shreya Neja, and with me is my co-host Neeta Neja, who's also founder, president, Trends International INC. Trends is a vibrant platform that has created a confluence of ethos and aura around these subjects comprising of art, literature, culture, and social issues. The intent is to bring connoisseurs and discerning audience on a common platform with international, nationally acclaimed authors, artists, musicians, and even actors for free-flowing exchange of ideas and critical thoughts that emerge from these dialogues. We started our popular author interaction series in July 2020 as a result of the pandemic, and we've only gone from strength to strength. If you are interested, you can have a look at our different videos of the author interaction so far on our YouTube channel, which is of the name Trends Events. Today, we are extremely honored and delighted to welcome Mr. Sanjay Jha. Sanjay Ji is a former national spokesperson of the Indian National Congress Party and ex-president of All India Professionals Congress. He is the executive director, Dale Carnegie. Sir is also a columnist and author, apart from being an investment banker, much sought after TV panelist and cricket commentator. Welcome, Sanjay Ji, on our platform, and it is absolutely delightful to have you with us today.
Basically, Shreya, thank you very much for inviting me, and to your mother, Neeta, and to yourself. You've been extremely warm. I think the invitation was, something that I just could not ignore from the moment we got in touch. And I know that Trends has been doing some extraordinary work in getting authors to have a dialogue with frankly, people who are potential readers. So I'm excited to be here, and I look forward to a nice conversation with you. I have been used to handling Arnab Goswami, and I think he never gave me a chance to finish the sentence. I have a feeling that both of you look like you have a more generous disposition. So I'm excited.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Sanjay Ji. First of all, really congratulations for an immensely enjoyable, easy to read book, India Unraveling, India after 2014. So today, as you all know, we are going to discuss Sanjay Ji's book, and it's definitely much talked about book right now. This is definitely a gripping book that captures the drama of 2014 general election results and the politics that preceded and followed. It's in fact an insider's look at how elections are fought, won, and lost. And it has been published by Westland, and I'm very glad to announce that I'll be declaring the name of two very, very fortunate winners at the end of the session who are going to win Sanjay Ji's much sought after book. In fact, as I just said, this book is indeed making a lot of waves, and it is definitely part of some very, very heated discussions in political circles and among the rest of us. So Sanjay Ji, at the beginning of the conversation itself, I would like to go back to some very, very powerful 3 words that you said in one of your interviews to a leading newspaper: perform or perish. This kind of sums up your decision to raise the leadership issues in the Congress, and you've been very, very transparent in expressing your thoughts on this in the book as well as in your interviews. So please tell our audience today, what exactly do you mean by these words?
Well, Neeta, in my opinion, whether you're a football coach, a cricket player, a Bollywood actor, a politician in India, a corporate guy abroad, it doesn't matter who you are. Ultimately, the only acceptable standard for individual performance is, have you succeeded or have you failed? Now, politics is a tough one because, unlike maybe a sports where you get a runner-up trophy, in politics, the winner takes all. So Donald Trump believed that, he got a lot of votes, but even if Joe Biden had 1 vote more, he would be the president of the United States of America. Simple as that. I mean, the BJP may have got 38% of the vote share in India, but that is the largest of any single party, and therefore they are in government. So I think what we need to recognize in politics is that either you are able to triumph at the hustings or you don't. You can't complain. For example, I remember Rajesh Khanna losing an election in New Delhi to L.K. Advani of the BJP by just a handful of votes. But it's a reality. I mean, L.K. Advani went on to become a member of parliament and later on the deputy prime minister of India. Rajesh Khanna had to fight another election to beat Shatrughan Sinha to become an MP. So that's the way it works. I mean, if you look at the Brisbane Test against Australia, which India won in a miraculous fashion, I mean, that's what the world remembers. And I do feel that the reason why I said that to the Congress party is because we have been losing not just 2 Lok Sabha elections, Neeta, we have been knocked out in several state elections. And there is a message that is coming from the people of India. This is not about BJP or Samajwadi Party or RJD or any other party. The people of India are probably telling the Congress, get your act together. You need to change something, whether it's a leadership or your communication, selection of candidates, election campaigning, strategy, the brand, whatever. You got to change something. And therefore, my message to the Congress party remains consistent even today, Neeta, that if you don't perform, make way for somebody else. And there is no shortage of talent in the Congress. So I do believe if people haven't been delivering results, they should make way for somebody else to take over.
Absolutely right. You're so right in this. You've always said that, in fact, you've said it on various platforms, that India is definitely bigger than all the parties put together. And as you just said, that there is no permanent winner in politics. And it is important that with dialogues, with constant dialogues and conversations, we need to keep the governance on toes. So what do you feel about the importance and relevance of social media in this context?
Well, look at the fact that today you had a tweet from Rihanna, who I can promise you 99% of the BJP hadn't even heard of. Rihanna, well, an international rock star singer, hugely popular. She's got more Twitter followers than Mr. Modi and Mr. Rahul Gandhi put together. And what did you get in India? You got a reaction from the government. The Ministry of External Affairs actually responded to Rihanna's tweet. I mean, that tells you the power of social media. And in a great number of ways, although it's been discredited because it's become, unfortunately, a laboratory for fake news, which I need to admit has been brilliantly used by the BJP to send out its propaganda material. I know all political parties are guilty of an occasional faux pas and distorted misinformation. But the BJP has made it into a fine art. I think I have to concede that. The way they actually have bludgeoned Rahul Gandhi's reputation by morphed videos, fake attributions, calling him Pappu repeatedly. I mean, you can destroy people's reputation on social media. I just read a tweet today by Rana Ayub, who's been a fairly intrepid journalist, who says she's been harassed like nobody's business. So I do believe that while social media does mean that information has got democratized to a great extent, that you're not bound to watch TV news or read a newspaper to get information, the truth is it is a double-edged sword. And while it has definitely made information faster, freer, and you get greater access to information, the downside is that if there is somebody out there with a malicious agenda, that they can succeed as well. As you know, that the Facebook has a very cozy relationship with the current dispensation. So these are some hard realities of our times. But Neeta, to keep my answer short, I do feel that no political party, no public figure, no business entity, no individual who has an interest in engaging with people, whether they're your friends or consumers, or whether you are doing it as a matter of growing your network, you cannot ignore the power today of an Instagram or a Twitter or a Facebook, because these are ways by which we have become actually more globalized citizens. And the fact that Rihanna and Greta Thunberg and Meena Harris is now becoming part of India's political narrative, I think is a positive. The fact that Black Lives Matter affected us here in India, I think it's a good thing. I think that the Me Too movement that happened with Harvey Weinstein's, excesses and pornographic behavior, and the fact that we took it up here in this country, that's the power of social media. It's a good thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Today, if farmers' protest is becoming an embarrassment for Mr. Modi's government, it is also a sign of the victory of democracy in a way. Because while the government here can build barricades and have its media capture and convey its own news, the world is saying, hang on, is there a human rights violation going on there? That there are internet shutdowns? Are there issues concerned with farmers not getting a voice or they're not being heard? So in a great number of ways, social media is now an inevitable part of our lives. And I think we need to embrace it. but we need to be circumspect.
I remember, in fact, I think I read it in the book or something that in the beginning, I think Mr. Rahul Gandhi was really adverse to the tutor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you kind of made him see that this is very important. And I think the number of followers that he has today,
Right.
we can see what is the power of tweeting. And I think he's very, very regular in that now.
Right. No, I think it's a good thing. I think, I mentioned that in my book, Neeta, for only one reason. This is the book here for all those who haven't seen it, The Great Unraveling, India After 2014. I want to make a point that there were a lot of people who were very cynical about social media in the early stages. Shashi Tharoor was looked upon as this very Western, one of those Occidental imports into India, because Shashi also has this extraordinary vocabulary and this powerful, kind of expressions. And people thought that, this was something like more American, and it was like a Coke and Pepsi making it into the dusty terrain of India. I think everybody was wrong. And, one has to give credit to Prime Minister Modi for that. I'm a big critique of the BJP's politics, their ideology, and the way they basically have, in my opinion, put Indian democracy at great risk. But you got to give credit to Mr. Modi for citing this technological platform long before anybody else did. And 2014, well, Twitter was not that big yet, but we cannot deny that he used social media to build up his profile with a lot of people in our country. And he bulldozed his own party, the BJP, into saying that I'm a better candidate for Prime Minister than Sushma Swaraj and LK Advani. Because I don't think the BJP could ignore the social media, kind of hurricane or tsunami that was very pro-Modi. So ultimately, I'm glad Rahul Gandhi bit the bullet a little late in the day, but it's better late than never. And, right now, Rahul's tweets are pretty engaging, they're powerful, they raise tough questions. The question is that, it's never enough to just tweet. You need a combination of public outreach to really influence the larger national opinion.
Absolutely right. I agree. You've always said that despite of everything, whatever has happened, I'll not like to go into that, you remain an ideological soldier of INC, and you really make it a point to always, whenever I read about you, this is something which really, really comes forward, because you are, as you say, a big fan of Gandhi Nehru viewpoints. India, we know, is the world's largest democracy, and we need really political commentators like you who are able to call spade a spade. And you've been very, very transparent in your views recently. And your political views are really making a lot of noise right now. So, but one question, which I don't know whether on this platform I should be asking you, but how do you counter the claims when people say that you are perhaps maybe crossing over to BJP?
Neeta, I was kind of anticipating this question. I know that's the reason why I clarified on my Twitter at the very outset. There are transactional politicians in India. Ayaram, Gayaram was coined for that very reason. I know many of my colleagues from the Congress have moved on to the BJP, but I'm glad I'm different. And I think it takes all types to make the world, honestly. For me, this has been an ideological game from the very beginning. I am with the Congress because I am at core a liberal person. I have always been against abolition of Section 377. I believe India is a country that is inclusive by its very inherent character. I am secular to the core. I cannot imagine an India where I'm a Brahmin, I'm a Hindu, but I have never been brought up to look at a Sikh or a Jain or a Muslim or a Christian with any degree of suspicion. As preposterous, as absurd. I mean, the beauty of this country is its diversity. What makes India an enchanting story is our multicultural character, our hue of a blend of different castes and religions, and the foods we eat, the number of types in which we can make aloo and bengan. This is a fascinating country. How can we destroy that ethos? And therefore, let me answer you without getting into an intellectual mumbo jumbo. I am not going to join any political party. The Congress has suspended me because I think the Congress has behaved, in my opinion, frankly, stupid. You don't need to overreact to somebody who's a core member of your team. I've gone and defended Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was being piled on left, right, and center by the media. I've been, kind of a ideological believer in the principles of what the Congress stands for. It doesn't mean that the Congress didn't goof up. Huh? The Congress has made mistakes. All political parties make mistakes. It's part of the game. Nobody's, dyed in wool 24/7 perfect. Show me one person, one political party, one movie star who hasn't done a flop, one cricketer who hasn't scored a duck. We all have bad hair days. It's pretty normal. As you can make out by my hair, I have had quite a few bad hair days. But on a serious note, politicians and everyone makes mistakes. But I do believe you get a chance to, re-narrate your story or reinvent yourself. And therefore, I'm not going away anywhere. The Congress can suspend me because I've been outspoken. I've, called a spade, a shovel. But nobody can take away the ideology of the Congress from me. And that is a Gandhi and Nehru ideology. Go back to the history of the Congress. This is a party that fought for India's freedom struggle. And I believe today when you find a Farooqi, or you find, people who are being jailed for posting a video which they put it on an error, a Rajdeep Sardesai and a Zafar Agha are called traitors. They have committed an act of sedition. Munawar Farooqi, for a comedian, he was arrested for having said nothing. I mean, just because they thought he's going to crack a joke that will offend some people, you put him in jail. I mean, where does it happen? You had this journalist who went all the way to cover the Hathras violent incident, and he was arrested for what? I mean, so therefore you do realize that India has become an illiberal democracy, okay? And let's not even try and pretend about it. I mean, Tandav, people are upset. Tanishq TV commercial, people are very agitated. Love jihad laws are there in our country. Journalists are being targeted left, right, and center. The government tells Twitter to shut down a couple of handles. For God's sake, are we a democracy or what are we? Have we become an authoritarian country? Is this a tin-pot dictatorship? And therefore, I am willing to understand that no party is perfect. The Congress has its forms, but ideologically I'm a congressman. So Nita, there's no question of me leaving the Congress. I'm perhaps more congressy than many of them put together.
I agree with your idea of not joining a political party. As of now, all of us are in that middle ground where we don't want anyone else to take charge, but also don't want the present government to continue the way they're continuing. So, even as someone who's 22, I've just started the first time I voted was in 2019. And something that I've noticed with respect to social media also, that, even though it has made all of us very polarized, I'm very, very happy that it's so accessible that even my 14-year-old sister, 4 years before her voting age, she is aware of everything, that we are discussing, the nitty-gritties, and she has that access to know about what is happening in our country and what is clearly black and white. So I think that's an advantage.
Oh, it is absolutely. And let me tell you, Shreya, democracy is not just, going in the ballot box and, showing your finger on Facebook and Twitter with a black ink. I mean, democracy starts with the ballot box, but it is blood, tears, toil, and sweat. You got to work very hard to preserve that democracy, all right? One of the biggest mistakes civil society makes, or people like you and me make, is to take democracy for granted. You can't. And if you look at leadership around the world today, whether it is Turkey, Russia, where there's a big protest going on as we talk, Putin has tried to poison his biggest political rival. Donald Trump literally disrupted the most classic democracy of the world. And we saw how that was happening. I mean, the Capitol Hill incident is not going to be forgotten by anybody in a hurry. Look at what's happening in Hungary. So there has been a rise of a right-wing authoritarian leadership all over the world. India is no exception. And I think we ought to be concerned, because if we believe that, democracy dies in small steps. I remember, Nita and Shreya, I'm going to take this luxury of 1 minute to tell you, the BJP always says, but the Congress did the emergency. And they're right. The Congress did do the emergency. Mrs. Gandhi made a terrible mistake. But because the emergency was spectacular, it stood out, it was unprecedented, people remember that as an incident and keep saying that the Congress is dictatorial. But Mrs. Gandhi declared it lawfully. And Mrs. Gandhi, after 21 months, removed it. She had elections. And I'm very happy that the Congress lost, because the public of India told the Congress that's not the way India's constitution allows you to govern my fundamental rights, right? What have you had since 2014? NGOs are harassed. Amnesty International doesn't even have an office. A Greta Thunberg and a Rihanna are threatened. If you become too critical of Mr. Modi's government, they will tell you, go to Pakistan. Everyone is an enemy of the state, is an anti-national. You support the farmers, you become a Khalistani or a separatist. I mean, which kind of a world are you living in? So let's face it, whether it's journalism, look at the amount of threats to journalists in India today. And let's look at the hard reality, right? The Economist and all the freedom indexes of the world have lowered India by 5 or 6 notches, because democracy and freedom in our country is now nothing but a synthetic texture. At core, people are practicing self-censorship. So my short answer, Shreya and Neeta, and to your audience, is please do not believe that if things collapse, institutions collapse, trust me, no one is not vulnerable, because everyone becomes vulnerable.
Also, coming back to your book, I have to congratulate that, the way you speak and your personality comes out in exactly what you're writing. The commas and the brackets. So even though you've tried to put your book very factual, but in the brackets and in the commas, I know your opinions and I know where your views stand. And in fact, so I had this question. I think in the second chapter, Narendra Modi's chapter, you've acknowledged his brilliant Hindi skills, and in the same line you express that for a leader of the nation, it is a practical necessity that that person should know Hindi well enough. But yet you go on to say it's not something you endorse. So could you tell us a little bit more about why you feel so?
Because I do believe that, if you look at Indian politics from the beginning, most of the people here have been from the Hindi belt of India. And barring, of course, P.V. Narasimha Rao, who, by the way, spoke outstanding Hindi, incidentally. But Mr. Deve Gowda did not. But you have had mostly Hindi-speaking leaders. But I do believe that India is a country that needs to respect its different regional characteristics of our uniqueness. And you cannot make, and although I do believe that today when a leader speaks very, very good Hindi, India looks upon them as being powerful orators and speaking with the national sentiment. Mr. Modi, I don't think is a great orator. He's got a very predictable style, but he speaks brilliant Hindi. And I have met people, by the way, who say that we are so impressed by his Hindi that we think he sounds like a leader. Rahul, in my opinion, has not worked as hard on this aspect of his political rhetoric. It's important to get your Hindi right. And this is one feedback that a lot of us have given him, both formally and informally. I also, Shreya, I'm so glad you asked this question, because I know that you have, in a granular fashion, really highlighted the portions that hit you hard. The reason why I mentioned that as a caveat is because I do believe that tomorrow, if there is somebody from Tamil Nadu or Kerala or Karnataka or Telangana who doesn't speak good Hindi, hey, that should not be held against you at all. After all, Hindi is not a national language, right? So, ultimately, India has to learn to listen to the language of, I would say, love, the language of tolerance, the language of development, the language of inclusivity. And whether you speak Hindi or English or Malayalam or Telugu or Tamil, to me that's irrelevant. And I think that is what we need to work towards. So I do mention the practical reality, as Shreya, as you rightly pointed out, that's true. It's pragmatic to speak good Hindi. यदि कोई हिंदी एक बहुत जज्बे के साथ या जुनून के साथ बोलता है और आपको लगता है कि यार ये बड़ा शानदार प्रवक्ता है, आप किसी को देखिए, आप टीवी पे जो भी भारतीय जनता पार्टी का हो या कांग्रेस पार्टी का हो, यदि उसका उच्चारण सही हो, सही शब्दों का प्रयोग किया जाए या बोलने के अंदाज में कुछ ऐसी काबिलियत हो, तो आपको लगेगा यार ये तो भविष्य में ये प्रधानमंत्री भी बन सकता है. So that is the general perception that we have. जो लोगों का नजरिया ऐसा होता है. So I wrote it from that aspect, but I do believe it doesn't matter whether you're a Bengali speaking or a Gujarati speaking or a Marathi speaking, and you don't know Hindi or English. I think that should not be a discriminating factor at all.
I totally agree with you, because I've actually studied in a South Indian college, and I agree that Hindi is not the end all. So it can be in majority, but it doesn't need to be the end all. And another aspect of your book that I really like, that, you know, the way you've described the political climate of our country, and you've highlighted the electoral playbook of sort of Congress and BJP both. But how would you say that your book is different from the dozen other political books going around in the market right now?
You know, Shreya, let me do a little bit of a TV commercial of myself here. This is a self-advertisement, because you have fortunately or unwittingly given me that platform. You know, mostly you'll find that politicians write the kind of book that I've written, which is almost like a candid story at the fag end of their career, when they have no stakes. I am still, I think in politics, they would call me pretty young, because I'm 59. And many people would say, you know, that wrong time for Sanjay to, you know, kind of be so forthright, to bite the bullet, or to maybe make comments that may boomerang on him. So I'm one of those rare types, I guess, who has taken the big bold risk, is to put out my thoughts out there. I've questioned my own party. How many people would do that? I think many people in the Congress party would think that Sanjay has literally written his political obituary in the Congress. I don't think so. I believe politics needs people who can, you know, talk frankly and freely when they're still active in that entire mainstream. I mean, what is the joy of writing when you're politically relevant? Or when you're just read as, oh, this is what he said. Why did he say that then? At least nobody can make that accusation against me today. So I feel, Shreya, that's what makes the book a lot more different. Also, I don't think I have, you know, been a telltale kind of a guy. There are lots of things I could have said about my experiences in the Congress, but the idea was not to embarrass my party. The idea was not to humiliate somebody in the party. In fact, a lot of people thought, you know, by the early reviews, that the book is going to be anti-Rahul and anti-Sonia Gandhi, etc. And they've discovered it's such balderdash. My book actually praises Mrs. Gandhi. It actually speaks of Rahul in very eloquent terms. It even praises Priyanka. And yet I go on to say that the Gandhi dynasty needs to make place for a new kind of a leader. So I don't think, you know, these things cannot coexist. Like, for example, you may say, Sanjay, maybe I like what you said here, but I thought that was utter crap. And it's okay. You know, and nobody is, you know, we don't have to be totally embracing everything about a party or an individual. So I believe that's the one unique part of the book. And the second part is that, you know, I think I've written this book more as a citizen of this country and less as just a political mouthpiece of the Congress party. I've been critical of Mr. Modi and the RSS and the BJP because, you know, you can't allow lynching to happen in this country and go back to sleep in the night and wake up next in the morning and say, hey, are we having a strawberry milkshake for breakfast or are we going to have a blueberry muffin? I'm sorry. If people are being killed by mobs in India, I think all of us should feel sick in the bottom of our stomachs. I mean, I have said this in some interview, but I'll say it here today because it gets me very angry, actually. A citizen of this country gets killed by a mob. Forget whether he's a Hindu or Muslim. Forget whether it was an accusation for, you know, child kidnapping or carrying cattle. And somebody is killed in cold blood. And we're okay? We're okay with that? And I do believe, you know, India needs to wake up. You know, we got to rediscover our moral compass. And, you know, all of us on this show right now, I mean, Shweta, Asha, Pradeep, Ranchu, Niranjan, Saroj, everyone, we are damn privileged. We are very, very fortunate to be living above a certain poverty line where we can go on Swiggy and Zomato and order some pizza tonight. But I think there are large pockets of this country that live below the poverty line. And worse, they do not trust the state, they don't trust the police, they don't trust the local courts, they don't trust the panchayat, they don't trust their own leader they voted for. And that's a tragedy of our country. And I think it's our responsibility as custodians of our country to fight for it. We are not small. Okay, let's remember this. The politicians from the Congress and BJP come to us with folded hands for our votes. And after they win the election, they're going to make you and I terrified about speaking the truth to power. For God's sake, we need to speak up.
The best part about the book is that the world is in a political storm right now. India is. And you are inside the eye of the storm and you're narrating your story. So I think that's why people need to go and read your book.
Well, thank you, Shreya. I mean, I'll tell you, the book has got a lot of anguish and pain, And, I actually wrote this book, Shreya, around the time that I had COVID last year. And I was amongst the first few, or rather, if not the first politician. Jitendra Awad, I think, was another Maharashtra politician who had it. But I had COVID at that point of time. And you realize in those moments about how vulnerable you can be. Life is fleeting. And ultimately you recognize that, what do I give back? What do you do with all the education you had? I asked myself the question, so I'm a postgrad, I'm an MBA, I'm a PhD in economics. I've done reasonably well in my professional career. I'm a public figure. A lot of people see me on television speaking on behalf of my party. Can I do something where I can write on issues that I think an Indian should read, irrespective of their political preference? So Shreya and Neeta, I'm hoping, that people don't read this book as just the ranting or the rhetoric or the hyperbole of a Congress guy. Actually, I've been critical of the Congress because I feel if the BJP today has dominated Indian political landscape, it's a Congress that has given it to it on a silver platter. And I do believe that if India doesn't have an opposition, then, let me tell you, Indian democracy and our constitutional purity comes at risk. And even if there are people on this show who love the BJP, there's nothing wrong. But boss, if somebody criticizes Mr. Modi or Mr. Shah or the farm laws or the handling of the CA protest, none of us are anti-national. Okay. And I don't think Shreya or Neeta or Pranshu or Shweta or me need a certificate from the BJP or the RSS that I'm patriotic or I'm nationalistic or whatever. We don't need certificates from anybody. That's it. I think the moment this country stops distributing certificates for your patriotism, we will get home.
I today only actually read a quote. Somebody wrote that, you're patriotic when you speak up for the citizens. It doesn't necessarily have to be the politicians or anybody else. You're patriotic when you
the famous quote, Shreya, where they say that the true patriot is one who fights for his country against his government, because the governments of political parties will come and go. The BJP wins today, the Congress will win tomorrow, UPA will come in and NDA will come back. Listen, the country is much greater. And I'm glad, Neeta, you have done some extraordinary research on my previous interviews. And I have said it and I'll say it again. Mr. Modi and Mr. Rahul Gandhi are not the be-all and end-all of Indian politics. Okay, life moves on. Life moves on. It will. Trump is already history. Okay, let's recognize this reality. The people of this country deserve good governance. They need to breathe good air. They need jobs. They need to feel safe and secure. Women need to feel empowered. Women don't need to feel unsafe and discriminated against. We don't need these glass ceilings. People who are in love with people in their own sex can, love them without having some cop knocking on the door and threatening them with criminal intimidation. Let's become the country that Gandhi wanted us to become. And if this country begins to celebrate Nathuram Godse and actually denigrate Mahatma Gandhi, then I'm sure we have a massive crisis of morality.
You've been very transparent in what you say. And when you talk, it doesn't look which party. You're not siding anybody. You're just saying the bare truth. And, that is what came across from your book too. In fact, in your words, there is a choice in our country between dictatorship and dynasty. You mentioned that before. your words. So who do you think will be the right leader for our country? What all should we look into somebody who will be our next leader? I mean, what do you think? I mean, just as a neutral person, tell us today.
Yeah, Neeta, in my opinion, you need a leader who is most important of all, inclusive. One who does not differentiate between us people of our country. This is a great country. You cannot have a leader who says that I will go to a temple, but I will not wear a skull cap. Or I believe that attending an iftar party is against my party's larger political nazariya. I'm sorry, that doesn't hold water. It also means that you can't say that, the minority is a vote bank. So if I do something for them, then I'm assured of an X vote because, I'm the only one who's fighting for them because my opponent is seen as a majoritarian guy. That also does not work. Therefore, I'm saying that what you need in practice and perception is a leader who looks at us, whether a Dalit, an Adivasi, a scheduled tribe, a Sikh, a Jain, a Hindu, or a Muslim, a Christian, and says, you know what, we're going to all of us work and fight together. I was there in Mumbai on 26/11 when those horrific terror attacks happened. NSG commandos flew into the Taj and the Oberoi. Did anybody in our country say this NSG commando, is he a Muslim or a Sikh or a person from the South or a Bengali or a Gujarati? What are we doing here? In the Indian cricket team, when we do so well, do we ask them what their religion is? No, you need the one criteria. You can have a great administrator, a wonderful orator, a very charismatic leader. You need somebody who's democratic, of course. I mean, those are given. But I do believe if you're not inclusive, you don't qualify for the job. India's beauty, honestly, the beauty of this country is, I'm a Bihari. I'm married to a girl who's, half Maharashtrian, half Gujarati. My daughter speaks some third language. And, end of day, I'm delighted that we are like, eating all kinds of food. My house help is from Jharkhand. My chap who's been driving my car for a long time is from Uttar Pradesh. Somebody who comes to my house to cook is a Rajasthani. I mean, this is the blend of this country. The people in my company come from all states of India, and that gives me a thrill. It's a joy. So yes, I am very passionate on this subject. I believe India needs a leader who doesn't just pay homilies to Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and all these sexy slogans. What we need is people who actually believe in it. And if we get that right, we will never go wrong.
It reminded me of a conversation that you had written about in your book with a taxi driver in Mumbai. And I wanted to ask you, did you always plan this book that, you wrote down the incidences as it happened, or was this all of these were from your memory? Because I've noticed a lot of these incidences you have written down, just, real life incidences.
Well, Shreya, I want to tell you something. You should seriously contemplate journalism at some point in your career. You are an absolutely, and I'm not trying to flatter you, okay? Neeta, I'm not trying to flatter your daughter, but that's a brilliant question. It gives me so much of satisfaction to know that you have really read the points in the book that probably triggered an emotion in you. Because I do believe ultimately we are emotional people, we are not plastic characters, we are emotional, we cry, we laugh, we have pain, we have reason to be joyous. These incidents really make you think. And the reason why I put them all in the book, Shreya, is because I do believe that, we all tend to always celebrate the people we think who are powerful. So we love to admire politicians, Bollywood actors, cricketers, celebrities. You saw how these celebrities showed you their chocolate eclair spine yesterday in the way they tweeted the one knock on the head, and everyone went tweeting saying, man, India's sovereignty is at risk. And I'll tell you what, Shreya, this country's real heroes are those unsung people that we encounter daily. I'll give you an example. Many people in my office will come late and, come up with some very brilliant excuse. but my driver of 24 years always comes home on time. Now, if I don't learn from that, I'm just being one elitist snob. I have learned the maximum from people that are so nondescript and never heard of. Ask a journalist today, they'll tell you they always, when they cover an election, they ask a taxi driver ki, yahan ka hawa kya hai? But that man has traveled with many passengers and he's had conversations and he can tell you the mood of the general janta. So, Shreya, I have honestly tried to pepper the book with stories. You know that story where I talk about this young Muslim boy who gets into this flight with me and who's very worried about, his mother is very worried about his future in our country because of lynching. I actually had a conversation with him when I narrated that. And then in the same thing, I write about that stockbroker who said, hey, what's the big deal about lynching? Hua to hua, kya badi baat hai? Kisi ki maut ho gayi to kya badi baat hai? And of course, he's a stinking rich South Mumbai stockbroker. It doesn't make a difference to him. And I think it's important to see these contrasts. Because I believe a country will always struggle if the people who are educated and apparently enlightened put a certain curtain on top of their eyes. And I do hope that these stories make people realize that the idea of India is not the prerogative of Mr. Modi or Mr. Rahul Gandhi. It also belongs to Niranjan and Saroj and Shreya and Neeta and Sanjay and to that house help and to that laborer in Odisha, to that young girl who's studying to become a scientist in Durgapur, and maybe that young student who's struggling to get admission in a college in Darbhanga. Everyone owns the idea of India.
I have a lot of questions, but we need to move on to the interactive round. So just a very small question before we move on to the audience asking questions. It's just about how do you handle literary criticism, specifically coming from people who you feel have not even read your book. So I understand there's a lot of discussions around your book, but how do you handle that sort of criticism?
Well, I think the first thing is that you've got to welcome criticism. If I say that I believe in democracy, then democracy begins at home. And I cannot afford to be thin-skinned and, get paranoid because somebody didn't like your book. They didn't read it, but they still trash you. Hey, that's their opinion. That's their fundamental right. Learn to live with it. It's as simple as that. I was told by my publishers, Amazon, that many people in the right wing will go to Amazon and, abuse you on the ratings. Without reading the book, they will rate it as 1 and bring down your rating. I said, well, so be it. But can they take away from the fact that a Nobel laureate called Dr. Amartya Sen believes this is a book that India must read? So to all those trolls who are going to trash my book, I'm like, man, I got no problem at all. So I think the larger thing is you got to have self-belief. You got to have confidence in yourself. And if you believe you've spoken the truth, you have nothing to fear.
I would say here that not only Amartya Sen, but S.Y. Qureshi, who's been the former chief election commissioner, Barkha Dutt, Rajiv Sardesai.
Yeah. All lovely people.
Absolutely, they've been endorsing your book. And once you read this book, you realize what is it all about. I mean, I would request everyone to read it to find out, how and why this book has been written. So as Shreya said that we'll go on to the interactive round. There are some wonderful people waiting for you and they want to ask you some questions directly. I will begin with Mr. Ajay Juneja. In fact, he's the Managing Director, Juneja Bright Steers, and he's also the President of Manufacturers Association of Faridabad, and he's into a lot of charity work. Ajay, your question, please.
Hi, Sanjay.
Hi, Ajay.
Thank
nice
you.
To see you.
Yeah, thank you, Neeta and Shreya, for giving me the opportunity to have an interactive session with Sanjay. Sanjay, I've heard about you and I've read about you also a lot of things. And I was just wondering that why you are a very congressman and you have been supporting Congress and you're always with the Congress. Why Congress is losing in every elections? And I don't think that, I think that the fire in the Congress party is going out, and the energy, the levels of energy which was there, which you talk about the independence level, that Congress was a party who went for the election, who got the independence. But where is it now going on? Why Congress is losing?
Ajay, a very relevant question. A lot of people are deeply worried about where the Congress is headed. Because if the Congress fails, I don't really think that India will ever have a robust opposition. And democracy needs a very vibrant and a very energized opposition party to ensure the checks and balances are in place. Why is Congress party losing? One, definitely there's a disconnect with the people, and perhaps the perception that the Congress is inward-looking, dynastic, looks at self-aggrandizement, that it was corrupt during the UPA 2 time. These images or perceptions have stuck for a long time. Now you would say, well, why haven't you changed the perception? Exactly the problem. You see, when you lose, and Ajay, you will know you're part of the business world, in the corporate world, if you have a bad quarter, the entire shareholders in the board stresses, you burn the midnight oil. And here the Congress has lost 2 Lok Sabha elections, and we haven't even had one internal brainstorming session to find out why we lost. You just can't say that Mr. Modi's wave beat you. There's a reason why Mr. Modi's wave is winning. The BJP in 2019, the economy had tanked. Jobs were not there. You've been part of industry, you know what demonetization did to it. The informal sector was disrupted. BJP wins more seats. How do you explain that, right? So I think the Congress party's internal, democracy, where you need to come up with the strategy, tactic, has been missing. Number 2, leadership is definitely a problem. We can talk about it till the cows come home. But the most important ingredient, in my opinion, is a Congress of late lacks hunger. There's no hunger. You see, when you lose, it should make you wake up to say, I want to fight it out. I'm not that bad. I'm a party of Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Rajiv, Indira, we've Lal Bahadur Shastri. We built this country. Ajay, I've asked this question to so many people. I've said, wherever you are, stop there for a while. Look around you. Can you tell me the port, the flyover, the international airport, mall, multiplex, factories, industrial parks, SEZs, expressways? Tell me, how much of that has come since Mr. Modi became Prime Minister? Or all of them are like, yeah, actually it came before. I said, exactly. And the Congress is not able to tell the people that we built this country. Sure, we lost 2014 for whatever reasons, but for God's sake, have the confidence to go out and tell the world that you are a viable alternative waiting to come back. And I think until you have the hunger, you don't come back. I think that is Congress's problem.
It is not because of that there's the dynasty. I think the main reason has been the dynasty.
I mentioned that.
They are not bringing new leaders inside.
I mentioned that.
They are not allowing other people to come up for the leadership, to take the leadership. Once there was only Narasimha Rao they allowed. And after that, they make the Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister, but still Sonia Gandhi was the president of the party. And why they're not allowing other people to come up and become the party, the presidents of the Congress party, Congress Working Committee party, they're not allowing. They have got good leaders, they have got good people who can take the charge, but they're not allowing it. Why don't you speak out and then come out with these things? That if they want the Congress to come up, they have to do something for that.
Joy, I completely agree with you. I have brought this issue up. And I do think that if the Congress party is not able to put a non-dynastic leader, and there are many good leaders, as you correctly mentioned, we will be seen as a party that is privately held. And that's not a good phrase for the Congress. We are not Samajwadi Party. We are not Mayawati, or we are not, Jagan Mohan Reddy or RJD. So I think this is the problem, and I totally agree with you. But I'm pushing for it. Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Instead of private limited company, it has to be a public limited company. Then only it can grow.
Yep, I buy that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Shreya and Nita, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Ajay. In fact, people who have joined late, I must tell them that we are discussing the book by Sanjay Jha. It's a fantastic book and it has been published by Westland and it is available on Amazon. So do go and buy it and read it. Now we have Naina Sagar. She's a theatre director and actor from the capital. Hi, Naina.
Hi. Hi, Sanjay. It was a nice, enlightening talk. And thank you, Nita, and thank you, Shreya, for inviting me to this. So I'll begin as a common citizen of India, Sanjay. one thing which always, if I were to exercise my electoral rights, the first thing that comes to my mind when I have to vote is, why is there a paucity of interesting leadership in Congress? This particular watchword of yours, perform or perish. Okay, so a very, very normal corollary to that, which comes is the dynastic way should give way to the meritorious contendership for party leadership. That is one, which is, again, you have been saying all throughout. Agree to that. Now, the second point, what I feel is, which I wouldn't name any party as such. If we were to talk of BJP, if we were to talk of INC, see, both the parties, they are run by broad T-words right now, and they are always trying to exploit the lacunae. Okay, so what is going to be our marketing peg? So we have secularism and inclusivity on the INC part, and BJP would then go and latch itself onto rabid nationalism and exclusivity. So they want to hold on to that. Okay, in this fight, what we forget is the common man. Okay, so you actually utilize 80% of your energy is spent in coloring the mindset of the electoral, people, the people who are going to vote for you, and then you want them to perform on the D-Day and vote for a party. And then what about the work ethic, which would drive whichever party is in power to take care of their concerns, So that is a big question mark. And most of the common people today, they feel, okay, these guys are just interested in doing this. Okay, they have an IT narrative going on. Okay, they're going to fight it out, slug it out. But what about our concerns? What about 80% of the time, this is going on? What about our concerns who are going to? So that work ethic, I feel, perform or perish. I absolutely loved that line of yours. That perishing happens there. So performance, if we are a performance-driven nation, if we are a performance-driven, if we had a performance-driven electoral politics also, I think even as a common vote bank, even we would be confused. We would be hard-pressed to think who to vote for. That is not happening. Sadly, after so many years also, it is not happening in India. Which I don't know what is the lacunae there. Why is it not happening? I wanted to know from your end, if you could light.
Oh, well, Nina, I'll tell you something. I mean, a very valid point. I will just tell you this, that, I'm glad to see such an aware citizen like you. Because, until you hold politicians accountable, unless you hold your leaders by what they promised in the manifesto vis-a-vis what they're doing in reality, until we, are uncompromising in the defense of India's constitution and democracy, and making sure the leaders are not getting away scot-free, India will not change. And please remember the history of all democracies in the world, from Nazi Germany, how Hitler suddenly became a big success, Hugo Chavez, you have examples of Donald Trump of late, you know what happened to China, India itself, our neighboring countries in Asia. There is turbulence. Democracy is not something that emerges and just happens to be one roller coaster ride where you can just kind of think everything is going to be, it'll go down and come up on its own. You've got to work hard. You've got to sustain it. And I want to repeat that. I think Joe Biden nailed it when he said democracy is precious, but democracy is extremely fragile. And I think democracy is frankly wafer thin. I mean, you don't handle that well, trust me, overnight you'll have an elected autocrat or a democratically elected dictatorship. And by the way, let me tell you, in today's times, you won't even know when that happens because there will be no emergencies required. You don't need an emergency to be a country without freedom of speech or without civil liberties.
Thank you, Nana. Let's move on to Niranjan Pandit. He's the information technology consultant. Niranjan.
Hi. Hello, sir. I have a very simple question. My question is, in your tenure that you were part of the Congress Party, how much percentage did the Congress Party follow the Gandhian principles? If someone who is perfectly following Gandhian principles is 100%, how much percentage did the Congress Party follow it? Please let me know. Thank you.
Well, Niranjan, I can't give you an exact mathematically accurate answer to that, but I will definitely tell you the reason why the Congress Party has probably lost its way is because it is not following the Gandhian principles the way it should have. Otherwise, the BJP would have never been successful in Operation Lotus and buying the Congress MLAs out because people would be ideologically committed. So the answer to your question is that we have drifted away from our core values, and that is the reason why the Congress Party today faces a clear existential challenge.
Now we have Asha Dhamia. She's an educationist and she's the Assistant Professor of Political Science.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, Neeta and Shreya. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to ask question to Mr. Sanjay. Sanjay, sir, I have been listening to you very keenly and very eagerly. And I have two questions, sir, to you. So my first question is, sir, you have said that your loyalty is to the Congress. You are Congressy by heart, right? By DNA, sorry. And the Nehru and Gandhi's Congress, you are saying, right? But sir, don't you think like Nehru and Gandhi's Congress had ceased to exist after 1970s, right? It had changed altogether under Indira Gandhi and later on under other leaders. So still you continued with the same Congress until last year, right? So why, sir, when you have been loyal to like Nehru and Gandhi's Congress, what made you stick to the Congress in 1970s, 80s, 90s, and means 4 decades? This is my one question. And my second question to you, sir, is you were saying that the present Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, is not a good orator, you said, but yes, his Hindi is good. And with that Hindi, he can make a connect with the electorate, like you said. It is some rhetorics he uses and the phrases he uses and sexy, those sabka vikas and sabka, that thing you used, you said. So I believe Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee had better Hindi than any other leader. His connect with the people was fabulous, fantastic, right? Still, he lost the election. Still, Congress came back for 2 terms successively. So is Hindi speaking so important for a leader in India? You still believe that Manmohan Singh, sir, were Prime Minister for 2 continuous terms, replacing Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was a fantastic speaker of Hindi. So please give me your views on these 2 questions of mine.
So, thank you very much for 2 thought-provoking questions. Number one, it doesn't matter that the Congress began to drift away from its core principles when Mrs. Gandhi announced the emergency. And thereafter, I agree with you that the Congress has degenerated substantially. Cannot deny that. However, does it mean that the ideology per se is evaporated? No, it hasn't, right? Now, there is a correct way to live life. If we don't follow the manual, it doesn't mean the manual is corrupted. It means we have corrupted ourselves. So the manual continues to remain your lighthouse, your torchlight. And I can speak for myself that I did not divert from those fundamental principles. So yes, that's one of the reasons why the Congress Party today is a paler version of what it used to be. But remember, Asha, that even during the 70s and then in the 80s, and even as late as 2004 and 2009, India had faith in a much weakened and a compromised Congress because the alternative was considered to be even worse. So I think, ultimately it's a question of a party's ability to go back to its roots, to always remember that you got to modernize, you got to adapt, you got to handle Shreya's generation of millennials, but it does not mean that you will not be inclusive. Just because you're on social media doesn't mean that you got to be violent. Just because you need to embrace technology doesn't mean you need to destroy relationships. they can all coexist. So I think it's about adaptation. The Congress has been slow to transform, but it remains at core the party that, in my opinion, is in synchronicity with India's constitutional values. On the Hindi aspect, I agree with you. Now, there are many reasons, Asha, why a politician wins or loses. You know, Mr. Vajpayee, unlike Mr. Modi, he's not just great in Hindi, but he was a fantastic orator. Mr. Modi, I believe, is not so good in orator, he's great in Hindi. The reason why I mention Hindi is because my experience as a spokesperson was that when I began to go to Hindi channels like Aaj Tak and, ABP and all that, the perception amongst Congress workers changed dramatically. And I realized something very significant there. That until I was on NDTV or CNN or India Today or Times Now, your urban crowd seemed to be pretty contented with you. But when you went into the interiors of India, लोग कहते थे कि आपने जिस तरीके से उस प्रश्न का जवाब दिया, उससे हमें लगा कि आप में वो लड़ने का जो एक जज्बा है, आप में जो एक तरीके से आप में हमारी विचारधारा के साथ आप इत्तेफाक रखते हैं, ये जब आप बोलते हैं एबीपी पर, तो हमें लगता है कि आप बिल्कुल जोश के साथ बोलते हैं. Now, I felt then that the larger part of India really watches more regional television. They watch more national television. Do you know that if you add all the English TV channels put together, I don't think they come to even 5 to 10% of one Hindi channel like Aaj Tak. So we are a small island, a small minority. And that's the reason why I said Hindi matters, because let's be realistic about it. A large part of the voting that has happened in the last 2 elections gone in favor of BJP has happened in the Hindi heartland states. But as I said to Shreya in her earlier question, that I do believe it doesn't matter what language you speak, but if you speak good Hindi, it definitely is an advantage.
Thank you, Asha, for your questions. Next, we have Krishna Kumar. In fact, he's an architect and he's doing his post-graduation in building engineering and management from SPA Vijayawada. Yes, Krishna.
Good evening, sir. Sir, by 2014, I was a core BJP supporter. Let me tell you the fact. Because I'm from Uttar Pradesh. So the promises they made were jumle, right? You also know that. We were getting jobs and everything. In fact, a lot of things happened. But by 2019, when I had to vote, your Congress, INC, has got such great learned leaders and politicians, particularly like Shashi Tharoor, whom I adore a lot. Okay, but why is INC stuck with a lot with the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty? And many people, including me, don't go for INC because seeing your probable PM candidate, make Shashi Tharoor or any other leader, great leader that Congress has, I'll vote for Congress for sure. But that doesn't happen. Why is the reason so?
Krishna, you asked me. Krishna, you asked me the same thing actually that Ajay had raised earlier, and correctly so. I agree with you totally that the Congress has got so much of talent. There is no talent deficit in the Congress party. You'll find brilliant people: Sashi, Sachin, Manish, Milind, Kapil Sibal, Anand Sharma. It's got the old, the middle-aged, the young. It's got a brilliant array of personalities. All of them very good, by the way. But yeah, I do feel that this whole acquisition that we have become, completely dominated by a monarchical culture under the Gandhis is hurting the Congress. I agree with you. And I meet many people like you who tell me that you give us a non-Gandhi leader and we do believe that the Congress party is excellent at governance and much better than the BJP, I can promise you that. So yes, I'm fighting for that too, Krishna, which is why I stand suspended today. But I do hope that, and it doesn't mean that Rahul is not a good person, by the way. It doesn't mean that Priyanka doesn't bring a lot of weight to the table. I mean, they are good people, they're very committed. But yes, a lot of people believe that the Congress does not recognize merit, it does not back talent, and therefore it only remains limited to one family. I think we need to change that perception. And hopefully, Krishna, you will see a good leader. And I hope that in 2024, you will back the hand once again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Krishna. We have one question from Babita. She's unable to join in. she says that India being the largest democracy, will it be able to ever achieve the integrity and maturity level of the oldest democracy, that is USA? Or we will end up being one-party state like Singapore?
Well, Neeta, I do believe that all democracies today are quite wonderful. I think in America, you had a president who was willing to tell that the electoral voting was a fraud. I mean, that's terrible. I mean, it's like the Congress saying that we never lost to the 2019 elections and we create a massive parliamentary paralysis. I don't think that's the way democracies work. So everywhere there is some chink in the armor. But there is no denying that the reason why America, by the way, is still stronger than India is because its institutions work. The CNN or the BBC or the Washington Post in the US or anyone for that matter, they can question the president, they can even sue the White House. New York Times is not scared of Donald Trump or was never scared of Donald Trump. They won't be scared of Joe Biden either. They have a judiciary. They have an independent media. They do have a civil society that speaks up. Hollywood normally takes on the president. The big tech companies take on the president. Corporate America is not worried about what the president feels. Many of them took on Donald Trump on his Islamophobia when he actually said that they will not be allowed to come into the United States because the employees of these companies would have protested against that illiberal character. So I don't think India lacks the institutions today. You see, when you don't trust CBI, Income Tax, Enforcement Directorate, people are beginning to even worry about the judiciary. The media, nobody cares for anyway. So I do believe these are the concerns. Will India collapse? I don't think so. I believe we'll fight back. This conversation is proof that India will fight back.
Yeah, we have Mr. Pradeep Nagpal. He's the retired Chief General Manager of Department of Telecom.
Hello, Sanjay ji.
Hi.
I have not read your book, but I have a question which many people, retired people who are bothered about the future of their children would like to know. My question is regarding this disinvestment of public sector undertakings in India. Recently, the finance minister in her budget speech has set a target of 2.1 lakh crore rupees for the financial year 2021. Of this, 1.2 lakh crores will come from disinvestment of PSUs. There has been a significant job loss during the last few years, and proposed disinvestment of PSUs will further aggravate the employment potential in our country. This clearly is contrary to the present government's own policy to increase the employment potential within our country. We would like to hear your views on this, whether the government is going right or people are right.
Pradeep ji, I have enormous respect for somebody who's already worked for a long time in the Indian bureaucracy, because I think political parties come and go, but the bureaucracy really administers the country. So hats off to people like you. I want to make a short answer. You see, this has been a very extraordinary year, the pandemic year. We all know that India is going to end the GDP with a minus 9.5% if the finance minister's projections are true. India will be down by 9.5% on GDP. That's humongous. Clearly, there is going to be time before India will see some kind of an economic recovery. So you're not going to see great tax revenues happen either. GST collections may have improved, but the alternative to the government for the expenditure that it is likely to make, whatever expenditure it has promised, whether it's in capex or whether it's in terms of infrastructure, etc., or for the farmers, whatever they intend to do, they need to raise money. And one of the options that government always has is to monetize public assets, is to actually try and encash on assets that they have in public sector undertakings that are listed. And there is some logic there. I mean, there is an old argument. Once upon a time we ran these hotels, ITDC hotels. Now with the Taj and the ITC and all the Marriotts of the world, and ITDC would have had to be so, right? So it's a natural step. Airlines, for example, I mean, there are many political parties that have goofed up, but should you be in the airlines business? I really don't think so either. I think it's a good thing to privatize that, nothing wrong, but you got to obviously protect labor. You got to make sure that people don't lose their jobs, and you got to create that element of security. Again, if you look at some of the other undertakings that the government is looking at doing, an IPO, for example, an LIC. Now, LIC is a cash cow, right? The critical question for all of us is that this process needs, Pradeep ji, to be transparent. You see, why in India the opposition gets very upset with the government is because this government's perception is that it favors a select club of industrialists with which it is very close. I don't want to take names, but you can look at the telecom sector as an example. And also the way some airports have been given to one or two industrialists. So I think the fear that people have is they will play first among favorites. And that is crony capitalism. India needs capitalism that is a responsible capitalism. What we are scared of is crony capitalism. So I will back the government in divestment, but if it is not transparent on pricing and ownership, then we have a problem.
Taking all the questions, and it's been so wonderful, Sanjay ji. And it has been such an informative and an enlightening session, absolutely. And I'm indeed grateful to you for having taken out time for our platform and for us. And I know you're very, very busy, but your perspective and vision is something to really look forward to and really imbibe. And I would also like to thank Westland Books and Shweta Bhagat for this enlightening session. It was made possible because of your support. And anything you would like to tell our viewers?
Well, for Neeta, firstly, both to you and Shreya, I think both of you have been so warm, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I could feel, the whole, sincere energy that you have transmitted through the Zoom screen. Thank you very much for it. To everybody who's come in here, do read my book. It's not very expensive. I think we all order. I would like more people to read the book and share it with others, because I think, we need to really care for our country. Whichever political party you vote for, frankly, that's immaterial. But I think you need to take responsibility for the state of the country. I think all of us are responsible for the state of the country. Every voice matters. And I would like you to read the book, debate it, question each other, come to Twitter or Facebook and talk to me. And in fact, take my numbers and write to me on my email and I'll talk to you about that. But I think get engaged. And therefore, to all of you, the very best. And to all of you here, Trends, Shreya and Neeta, keep this conversation going, because the more diverse views you hear, the better it is. So good luck and all the very best for the future.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. And I have to declare the two winners of the book today. One is Mr. Ajay Juneja and Naina Sagar. Congratulations to the winners. They're really lucky to have received your book. And for everyone else, I can say go on to the Amazon, click on the link, and you can always buy the book and read. And as Mr. Sanjay said, debate about it, talk about it. I think that will make a difference to our beautiful country. Thank you, everyone, for coming in. It's been a pleasure.